Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec. Today we're going to revisit a topic that we talked to Nick Plummer about very early on in our podcast series. And Nick talked to us about the sorts of outplacement services that he offers to people who are made redundant in organisations. And one of the things that he talked about was the communication of that situation. So he talked about it in terms of himself and how when he was made redundant, how he in fact told the neighbours, because he found that it was most difficult to tell the neighbours what he was doing, why he was spending more time in the garden, were his words. And there's a link at the bottom of the podcast for you to listen to that particular part of Nick's session with us. But today we want to explore that a little bit further. We want to talk about the communication that you provide to others around a redundancy. And we will at this point acknowledge that the language around it is always for us to say, I was made redundant, or you're being made redundant if you're the person who's giving the news. And both Fulyana and I have been made redundant, or our positions have been made redundant more correctly, more accurately. You know, I'm big on accurate speaking. But whilst we acknowledge that for the most part it is positions that are made redundant, the language around it that is commonly used means that it is a personal issue, and we do take it personally, and so we'll say, I was made redundant, or you are being made redundant on this day. And that's the sort of thing we want to talk about. We want to talk about the communication that you use with yourself, your self-talk, as well as the communication that you use in social environments, in family environments, in work environments, to be comfortable with the message that you're giving out about how you feel and what's happening.
I concentrate on you kind of just received the news that your role has been made redundant.
Oh, so good, isn't she?
So,
She'll sleep, don't worry.
Yeah, I will. So you just got that news. Let's face it, no matter how senior you are, no matter how many times you had to communicate this sort of message to others about their role or function or department, you can't help but take it personally, even though you can say it's not about you, it's a business decision, etc. But it hurts. It hurts that the organisation got to a point that don't need me, don't want me, or they want someone else, or the role is gone after all these years.
What I'm doing is not valued.
Yeah. So I think once you know that, do two things. Firstly, listen and ask questions to what is being said to you, which you would do because you already know that. The second thing is to understand the circumstances and talk about the communication from the organisation. Ask a specific question. Is there a way this is going to be communicated? Do I get a chance to communicate with people close, like for within work and outside work before you do that? Talk about timing of communication and organisation communication versus personal, you communicating. A lot of organisations say it only affects your position, so yes, you can go first and tell people. Let's agree on timeline, so then I, as your manager or HR or whatever, can communicate. It might say, no, we actually got a proper communication timeline because it affects the department and we don't want to hear from you and so on. So there is all those things to work out. Let's assume the timeline has been worked out. The most important thing is for you to then go away and work on your feelings. Work on your feelings. You might just go for a walk out in the street, don't talk to anyone or whatever, or ring a person who is a confidant, like if you've got a mentor or someone like that, not a friend at this point, if you've got other than a friend, and not the family member yet or a colleague. If you have someone independent like that who's distant but will be there to be a confidant, that would be great. Work it, talk about it, think it's a safe environment. Work it through, and then look at it as if, I know it's hard, but look at it as if it's a business thing, that you're going to be interviewed by the newspaper, by the media, by TV, whatever, about something to do with, and how you want to come across with that. You want to be genuine, you want to be truthful, you want to be professional, and you want your image to be as it should be, how it always is. Keep it intact that way. So keeping all of that together, then think on those lines and prepare in your mind how you're going to say it and to whom you're going to say it and how they might react and so on and so forth. Firstly, it is human, so it's okay. Don't indulge too much on "fool me" type of thing, even though you will say, "I'm disappointed," or that it was totally unexpected, or "I kind of worked it out already." Whatever the case may be, that will help. With your family as well, then explain it to them in a way that think it through about it's not happening tomorrow. I still got time. We do get we get support and what the financial is and all of those. So think it through. That's for the immediate communication. The other big one is before you embark on your next steps, which is the outplacement and all these things that are available to you, I suggest give yourself time. And the time might be just a short period of time to yourself. Of course, you don't want to be going on this fancy holiday and spend the money before you got it, because financial the financial side is a separate and a very important part, and you've got to do that with a financial planner type of person or the financial advisor, your accountant, whatever you use. But in relation to what you do, before you start talking about talking to recruiters, before you start talking about my next steps and what I want to do, just have, it could be just going away for overnight. It could be just playing golf. It could be whatever it is that you do that will help you just relax
just
and
take
think.
a break.
Take a break.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Take a break. It could be
Change
alone
of
or with a
state.
family.
Yeah.
You've got to always be mindful that you will be reflecting on a bit of concern, worry, whatever you want to call it. But once you process that, you will start seeing the opportunity. You will start seeing where you might want to be. You don't have to make that decision immediately, and you don't have to say, well, I really have to get a job tomorrow because I just lost one today. Giving respect to the financial aspects, you've still got time with the redundancy money to think beyond a week, at the very minimum.
From my experience, the most common reaction has been anger, and that has been the hardest to work through in the immediacy of the reaction. But if you don't work through that anger to get to some other place, then the anger remains, and the anger will often build, and the resentment builds for no other reason than you can't get past the anger. And the anger is a combination of those hurt feelings, of those the sense of worth and the sense of justice and all of those things. And that is a reflection of not understanding what has caused the situation in the first place. It is out of your control. And because it's out of your control, there is nothing that you could have done in the past to fix it or to preempt it, and nothing that you can do now to change it. It is what it is. And we have to have this point where we stop and start again. What came to my mind was an example out of a movie that I saw at the weekend. I saw the latest Robin Hood movie, and in that Tim Minchin is Friar Tuck, and without it being a spoiler, at one point in the movie he is excommunicated, and later on Robin Hood says to him, "I'm really sorry that I had forced you into that situation where you were excommunicated," and Friar Tuck says to him, "Don't be, I'm free." And the underlying message out of it is that his belief and his mission to bring God to people that he saw was not changed by the constraints of his employer. And so he still had things that he could offer. He still had things that he could do. He still had a purpose. His skills were still valuable. He was still needed. But he wasn't needed by a constraining employer, and it took someone to break him out of that for him to be able to see that. And I think that that's a really good thing to keep in mind, is that yes, this situation happens, and yes, we react to the immediacy of it, but outside of that immediate reaction, there are opportunities, there are things to do, there are skills that you have that people want, there are things that you could learn. It opens up. We hear people say it opens up all these possibilities, but you've got to know what you want to do with those possibilities. You've got to have thought beforehand of all of these things that you would like to do in your life that are longer term, that are outside work, that you might now have the opportunity to do, and commit to them, try them. If they don't work, try something else. It's not about success and failure. It's about trying. It's about doing something to continue contributing to the society that we're in. Bit philosophical, but
that movie example is brilliant because it really does sum it up nicely. And also, you didn't have control over the situation of what caused the position to become redundant, etc. But you also have responsibility to yourself for people that you're communicating with, both from a business and private sense, to see you and continue to see you and not the person that's hurt at the moment. And I think that's why you need time to process it, you need time to reflect on it, and you need time to prepare how you're going to present it. From what happened at the last job and why, even if you believe the organisation are making a big mistake with that decision, it's done. Don't go into that, it's too late. But you just explain the situation if you want, as part of your communication. What had happened, there was a merger, this is what happened, they decided not to do that business anymore. They wanted to consolidate, as an example. Keep it factual, keep it professional, as if it is going to be an interview on it will reflect in your demeanour, it shows your true self rather than the person who's just been through that experience.
But also I think what's important in that communication to the broader group is to remember that you are not the job.
Yes.
That the job is not the definition of who you are. And that if people still see you as the cabinet maker or the policeman or the team leader outside of the work environment, then you're sending out the wrong message. Because at some point in your life, if you choose to retire, you're not going to be that person anymore. So who are you going to be when you retire? And again, if we go back to Nick Plummer, he talked in our 100th episode, he talked about the change that had happened in his life since we had talked to him previously. And that when we talked to him the first time, he had all these grand plans, that he was selling the business, it was time for him to move on, he was doing all of these things that he wanted to do. And I think, in a sense, both he and John were in the same sorts of positions, and they both said that it was not enough, that they got to a point where they tried all the things that they thought they wanted to do with all of this time that they were going to have, and it wasn't enough. So you really need to overload yourself with things that you think you might like to do or things you'd like to try, and not be constrained by the job title of what you're doing now. And job titles is something we're going to talk about in another podcast, about whether they're valuable or not, because I see an increasing trend with retirees particularly to be lost, to not know who they are because they don't have a job title to use as their introduction. And so they'll say, I used to be, which implies that they're not anything now. And that's not the case. They might be so busy. We've got a friend who constantly will say to us, I don't know how I had time to work because I've got all these other things that I'm doing. But if you asked him what he does, he would say, oh, well, I used to be a builder, but now I'm these things. And so he still identifies with being a builder, but by using the word but in the middle of the sentence, what we remember when he's telling us is all the things he says afterwards, which are all the things that are more important to him now. Thinking about being made redundant, remember that it's the job and the job title, and it's not you or your skills, even though you're the one that's affected by the fallout of that activity. I think that's probably all we need to cover in this particular point, but I will remind you that we'll have links to the podcasts where Nick Plummer and John Eddy talk about these sorts of issues and the communication around being made redundant. For now, I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.